Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we'll be making this goblet. This is part 2 of an AI and fantasy themed series. These are the cards that I showed you how to make. And these were using images generated in Midjourney. So without further ado, let's jump into Blender, delete these two. Pew! And they're gone. Poor cube. Now, you could start with a cylinder here, but I chose to start with a single vertex. And first of all, let's just rename that to something a bit sensible. So let's call it, I'm going to call it Goblet. And in edit mode, of course, we're going to select that vertex and press E to extrude it. And snap along the x-axis by pressing the X key. At this point, just make a cup shape that you like. So I'll just do that. And with that done, we're going to add a modifier called screw, which is under generate. There it is. Obviously our normals are inverted, so we'll fix that in a second. Let's apply the modifier. And let's sort out our normals. You can see there I've got face orientation turned on by default, and they go red. So let's go to mesh, with everything selected of course. And normals, recalculate normals. And that should fix it. You can also press Shift N, and that will bring up the menu as well. So with that, let's add a subdivision surface modifier. Right click and shade smooth. Once you're happy with it, you can move on to the next part. So let's work on the base here for a second. I'm going to come back to this part later and take away what I've just done, because I had forgotten that there should be a rim, or just on going to the outside of the base, and I actually put the whole thing indented. So I will come back to that and fix it later on. I'm going to select these edges here and bevel them. I'll just speed this up again. And we're not going to bevel these ones here, we're just going to add a mean crease of 1. So hit Ctrl R, click and drag them in somewhere fairly close to the edge, not too close. Or you can press GG with the loop selected, and that will also slide it along the geometry. So that looks good. Now let's do the same at the top. So with that edge loop selected, I'm going to press Ctrl B, bevel it, and give it one cut in the middle. Use your scroll wheel, your mouse wheel, to scroll up and down to increase and decrease the loop cuts. So with that done, let's select that edge loop and just scale it in. Again, minor tweaks, speed this up. And again, that edge we want to be sharp, so give it a mean crease right there in the middle. Give it a mean crease of 1. And a supporting edge loop just there again. There you go, it's looking pretty good. Get into edge face mode, Alt click. I'm just thinking now I want to have the cuts a little bit differently, so I'm going to think about what I want to do here. I think I'll take that one and shift it up a little bit. That one as well, we'll just move up. And add a loop cut there, scale it out. So we'll add a little bit more geometry here. Need a few more subdivisions to create the top part, which is slightly indented. So now we can select these faces here, these loops. Press Alt E, and that will bring up a little menu. Select extrude faces along normals. Again, I'll speed this up. Same thing. Select those edges there. Give them an increase of 1. Some bevels. And then some supporting edge loops. Just the same principle again as we did earlier on. So let's turn off the subdivision again. You see me doing that a lot because you need to see what you're doing here. So I've selected the top edge and just pressed E and then S. So E to extrude and S for scale. At this point, switch to the side view and turn on X-ray. Or wireframe, up to you. I'm just going to bring these down. I'm going to make sure that vertex snapping is on, so that when I move them like this, I can hold down the control key and turn on the snapping as I'm working. So with that, I'm going to scale that out a little bit. And the same thing again now, just bring it down on the Z-axis, snap it, scale it, rinse and repeat. You get the drill. Let's just finish off the bottom of the cup there inside. That's looking pretty good so far. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press the C key and you get this little paintbrush basically to select faces. So I then pressed Ctrl plus to increase or grow the selection. And I'm going to bring these down a little bit. Just round off the bottom of that inside of the cup. There we go, just bring it down a little bit. Get a bit more curvature at the bottom. Then Control minus to select less faces, and then just bring that down a little bit more. Turn on the subdiv again. That looks pretty good. Got a nice rounded inside there. Now with these edge loops selected, we're going to bevel them again. So Control B to bevel, and we want just some supporting edge loops along either side of those really, just to give it a nice highlight there. Let's try 3, that looks better there. A bit more rounded off there. There we go. Now we're going to work on the glass. So press the C key, make a selection, press Ctrl plus, select the polygons all the way up to the top of the cup. And with those selected, you can press Shift D to duplicate them. There we go. Snap the right mouse button to leave them in place, and then press P to separate them into a new object. Now we've got a goblet.001. You can see there. So I'm going to rename that to glass. Excellent. Go into side view now. And we're going to shrink these down or scale them down just a little bit. Let's just turn that off so we can see what we're doing. Something like that would be fine. Doesn't have to be very accurate. You're not going to see the inside anyway. But we don't want the glass to be going through the lip of the cup, basically. So we've got a nice gap there. We can work with that. Turn X-ray off. You can see we've got a bit of a gap there, so let's select the, go to edge mode, in edit mode, select the edge loop, turn off the subdiv on the goblet as well, just to keep things simple. Switch to the side view, 1 or 3 on the numpad will do, and press E, Z, and that will extrude that edge along the Z axis. And you can press S to scale it in. So a few tweaks. That looks pretty good. Obviously our normals are kind of wacky right now, but we need to add some thickness anyway, so we'll do that as well. So Shift N brings up the menu, and I've selected flip in this case. Then we can add a solidify modifier. Bring that up above the subdivision surface modifier as well, because that stack is important. Do bear that in mind. So give it a thickness that you're happy with. I'm just going to turn on wireframe so I can see what I'm doing. Something like that. And also click even thickness just in the modifier settings there, just to make sure we've got a nice even thickness through there. And also, I sometimes also click normals, expand that and select high quality. Don't have to do that, of course. In fact, there you go. Just remember to do that, high quality, and apply that modifier. But keep the subdivision, of course, non-destructively, so that looks pretty cool. Let's turn the wireframe off. Lovely, but now we've got a nice base for our cup, or our chalice, or goblet, whatever you want to call it. Now this is an add-on. It's called JewelCraft. It's an excellent little add-on, and I'll show you how that works in a second. So once you've installed it, you click on the tab there, JewelCraft, click on Add Gem, and select a nice gem that you want to add. I'm going to go for the pear one. Click OK once you've made a selection, and there's our gem right at the bottom there. We'll bring that up. Now that's great, but I want it to be symmetrical vertically, so I'm going to split it in half. So with that, go into edit mode, press Ctrl R to add an edge loop in the center there. So zoom in, Ctrl R, click, right click to leave it in place, and then we can select all the lower vertices and delete those. Press delete and vertices. Now with that done, you can add a mirror modifier. We're going to mirror that in the Z axis or Z axis, not the X. So just making sure that there's no rotation applied to that at the moment, which there isn't. But there's a problem, there's a gap, because the origin point is not on that rim. So head over to options there in the top right and turn on origins, and that will manipulate the origin of the object. But before we do that, I've forgotten to flatten that out. So you can see those aren't quite flat. So let's go into wireframe or X-ray mode. Select all of these vertices. So click a box, drag a box and select them. Then press S for scale, Z for the Z axis, and then 0, enter. And that's nice and flat. Turn on origins in the options again. And with vertex snapping, we can snap that origin point to that line there. Perfect. And with that done, we can apply the mirror modifier. We don't need that anymore. And that's it. That's our gem done. So at this point, I'm just going to position it somewhere like this in front of the goblet. Make sure you check the side view that you're not intersecting with the goblet there. So let's rename that to diamond. Now, going back to this, we're going to select all of these edge loops here. Just make a selection of all of these. So Alt click and then Shift Alt click. I've still got that weird bug where I can't select them somehow. There we go. And then just delete them, or Control delete, and that will dissolve the edges, not delete them. You want to dissolve them. Now we've got the slope again. Let's just make some refinements to this because I don't want it to be so harsh, a bit more rounded and soft. Now add a couple of edge loops with Control R. Select that one and dissolve it. And with this one, I'm going to bevel it with Control B. Just like that. That's going to be like a little rim. So we've got those faces selected now. We can press Alt E again. Bring it up a little bit. Make sure that you've got shape set to 1 and not 0.5. We don't want it rounded, we want it to be supporting edge loops. And again, let's give that a mean crease because we don't want that to be subdivided and soft. Do the same on the other side. Mean crease of 1, and also add a supporting edge loop just on the edge. Just like that, and one on the other side as well. Perfect. So it's a very quick things to do, not too complicated. Let's go back to the glass now. I'm going to select this edge loop here. I'm going to duplicate it with Shift D. So right click to leave it there and separate it by pressing P. Now we've got this this edge. Let's rename that to chain or something else, whatever you want to call it. I called it chain, I wasn't sure what to call it. And with that, in edit mode, I'm going to select all of the points and right click and set them to Bezier and then automatic, that they're nice and rounded. So think of them as Bezier curves, which is exactly what they are, or curves as you would find in Photoshop. So I'm going to select a few of these curves, just select 2 of them and add some subdivisions. Again, very simple, just select 2 vertices, right click and select subdivide, the same way you would do for vertices in polygonal modeling. Now I'm gonna basically fit this curve around the jewel, the diamond. So just pull them around, work with the handles. I'm just using the snapping again to make sure they're roughly the same positions. So it's very fiddly, but not difficult task. But I guess this is the kind of work that nobody really enjoys really when it comes to these little fiddly things, but the results are really worth it. So stick with it. If you don't find this appealing, I don't think anybody does, but it is a lot of tedious work. But you know, the effort you put into it will show in the results, hopefully. Yeah, just making a few tweaks there. So you can also click on the handles themselves and move those individual points there. So So something like that is pretty good. Let's turn off the goblet. And we're going to add a cylinder. Make it very simple. 8 sides is more than enough, because we are going to make this very small and duplicate it 2 times. So let's make this make some adjustments to the size, and we'll scale it later. I'll try to do it in the add cylinder properties if I can, as a starting point anyway. So there it is down there. It's a bit too long, so let's make that maybe 0.25. Now that'll do for now. So what I want to do here is just create a little cross section of this chain basically. Let's make sure we add the origin to this. The origin points are really important here for this to work. The curve and the object need to share the same origin point location. That's really important. I can't stress that enough. So before we head on, let's grab these 2 faces on the edges and delete them, and add a couple of loop cuts with Ctrl R, because we're going to need to bend this and twist it. So a little bit more geometry would be nice. Let's rotate that along the y-axis by 90 degrees, so it's facing left to right. I'm doing that in edit mode. It's very important again. Now we've added an array modifier, and I'm going to turn merge on so that the vertices are merged between them. Let's increase the count. We can change these values later, but we can see that's working as expected. Then we need to add a simple deform modifier. Let's collapse the array one for a second. Now we've got twist on, which is what we want. You can see there it's twisting by 45 degrees at the moment, so we need a lot more in the angle for that to really show. So to test that, let's just increase that and see what happens. There you go. Something like that. That's working as expected. Let's put 360 for now, and we'll increase this number later on. And now we're going to add a curve modifier. Again, the stack order is very important here. And I've just used the eyedropper there to select the chain curve that we just worked on. You can see there, it's working, but it's all gone a bit weird. That's because our origin points are in different places. The curve point is at the center of the world, which is fine, but the cylinder origin point is there. We're going to set it to the 3D cursor by right-clicking Set Origin. So what I'm going to do now is go into the goblet and select this ring here and move the 3D cursor to that point there, which you can do with Shift S. You basically want that vertex 3D cursor somewhere around there, and move the origin points for these objects. To the 3D cursor. So that's the curve done. Now let's select the cylinder, set origin to 3D cursor, and voila, that's working now. Slightly off because when we look at our cylinder, it's not in the center of the origin point, which is fine because we're gonna make 3 of these in total. So in edit mode, select all of the faces and duplicate them. So just toggle the A button until you select everything. Move it a little bit closer to the to its origin point. Shift D to duplicate it and then move it. Shift D again, duplicate it. Zoom in a bit here and close that gap up a little bit. Something like that is fine. The important thing is that the origin point needs to be in the middle, roughly. That's looking really cool. That's working really well. So now we can increase the count. Then it goes all the way around. Perhaps I should have tried fill curve or fit curve under the fit type there, because we do have a bit of a gap now, but we'll try and figure that out later on. For now, let's get the twist a bit nicer looking. So we want 360, let's times that a few times. So So I'm going to do it by 10, so it's 3,600. It's looking better. I prefer a little bit more of a twist to it, so I'll probably double that to 7,200, so times 2. That looks pretty good. And after that, you can play around with the curve again, because you want the chain not to interact with the jewel, of course. You want to go through everything. So again, minor adjustments. Now you can see the chain on the curve. You can make these little adjustments to make sure that nothing's intersecting. And everything's looking pretty good. Now we've got the chain going through the glass, so I'm going to select all of these top curve points and just scale them out a little bit. Just make sure they're not intersecting with the glass. And that's fine. I've added a plane here, and I thought I'd make a little clasp just where that kind of intersection is there almost. So a very simple plane. You can add a cube and subdivide it. So I'll just speed through this. It's very simple. Add some loop cuts, move around some vertices and scale points and that kind of thing. Add a solidify modifier and a subdivision modifier. Let's go back to this gap we've got in the chain now. Now I'm trying to increase this incrementally until it matches there, but it's never quite closing, even though I've got merge first and last copies turned on as well. So what I'm going to do here is copy the whole chain and the curve and put them into a backup, basically, collection. So I'm going to call that chain decoration backup. There we go. So we're going to copy the cylinder, select the cylinder. Let's rename that to chain, actually. A bit easier to understand what it is. We'll select that. And the curve. Shift T to copy them. There we go. And drag those into the chain decoration backup collection, or whatever collection you created. Now we've got 2 copies, and we're going to basically apply these modifiers to the chain so that we can actually merge these vertices together. So let's start off by applying the array modifier. We want to turn off the other ones just for a minute, just to make sure that everything's still working okay. Let's turn on the other ones again and hide that collection because we don't really need to see that anymore. Now we can apply the simple deform and the curve modifier. Turn on subdivision. But before we see the result, let's merge these vertices that are a problem there. You can clearly see they're not merging. So make sure you're in X-ray mode or wireframe mode. Just draw a box around those, just like that. Got everything selected. And then right click. There's a bit of a distance there. Right click, select merge vertices by distance. There we go. Now that hasn't done it yet because the distance is too small. So we need to increase the distance just a little bit until it actually is within the tolerance of those vertices we selected. There we go. Point, whatever it was, 0004 worked for me. It depends on your scale, of course. Now, the only downside to what I've just done is the chain ended up being a little bit thinner than I anticipated. Let's scale up the diamond a little bit, bring it a little bit closer. Because the chain's thinner now, which I'm not keen on, to be honest. I prefer the original, but it's not a huge problem, of course. And that looks pretty. That looks pretty good. Because the chain is a little bit thinner, which I'm just fattening up there with Alt S. So select all of the places, press Alt S, and that will do that. And we can make some minor adjustments to this little clasp. Make sure that we're closing some of those gaps up, which you won't see anyway, but it just adds a bit more detail. So you've got a few recesses there. Look out for things like that. Fix those. Very easy to fix. Basically, when you're working with these kind of things, work with simple geometry, like a cube or a plane or a cylinder, with as few faces as possible. That way you've got more control over the modeling process. And that looks pretty good. So, for the next part, we're going to need these textures. The link is in the description, so feel free to go and download those. We're going to have this texture applied in this area here, but not to the actual faces there. We're going to duplicate these faces and have them as separate elements basically. So switch to face mode, select these faces. In fact, I forgot to select the supporting edge loops as well, because that's not big enough, the selection. And with that selected, you can press P to select, separate them into a new object. And I'm going to rename that to decor. So I'm going to scale them up. So you want to scale them out a little bit so they're not touching the goblet faces we just used to copy from. You can see the gap there we've got. That was my fault. Don't do the same. So I'm going to select these edge loops and scale them up in the Z-axis. Yeah, I didn't copy the other faces above that, so just select these and scale them up. Make sure medium point is selected. Something like that. Let's turn the X-ray on. You can see if there's a nice gap there. Or wireframe mode. Yeah, that looks alright. Got a nice consistent gap. Just make sure it's not touching the edge basically. So with that done, we need to unwrap these faces because we're going to be using these texture maps. So let's head over to, first of all, let's unwrap it. Let's just do the same for these faces here. So with that selected, press Ctrl+, which I should have done from before, and separate them out into a separate object as well with the P, and raise them up ever so slightly so they're sitting above the original geometry that we copied. Something like that is fine. Right, bit of renaming, put them into a collection called Goblet. Let's add these another gem using JewelCraft add-on. This time, this type of gem. And again, we don't want it to be this tall, so I'm going to split it in the same way we did the diamond. So add an edge loop, select the vertices, delete them. You get the drill. Make sure these are flat. So SZ0. Make sure the origin point is at that line. Add a mirror modifier and apply it. I'm going to flatten these out a little bit because we don't want these to be that large really. We're going to put this around the base and around the top. But before we do that, let's add a torus. I wouldn't normally add so many sides to this, but I'm doing this, this is going to be one object with the gem. It's not going to be a separate object, so I'm not going to add a subdivision modifier to this because that would affect the diamond as well. So we might as well add, you know, I don't know, 64, 128 size to that. We want it to sit roughly there. I'm going to select everything in edit mode, scale it down. So at this point, you just want to go into side view and maybe turn on X-ray or wireframe. Just rotate it so it faces, you know, it's aligned with that base of the cup really. Let's make a copy of it first because we'll need more of those later. It's really a good idea to make a copy because we will be putting very specific rotations on these. They're not going to be shared anywhere else. Do this in edit mode, by the way. Don't do it in object mode. You can do, but make sure you apply rotation after you've done it in object mode. But I'm going to do it in edit mode. And you can see there the diamond is kind of going through the base. So I want to move that up just a touch. Maybe scale it down a bit. And before we carry on, we've got some faces we don't really need there, so I'm going to hold down the Alt key, select this face loop, and delete those. Right, with that done, we can carry on with placing this a bit better than we have. So let's switch to either wireframe or solid with X-ray, side profile. Now you can just move this up in object mode, of course, doesn't have to be in edit mode. You can see the diamond is not going to go through the base of the goblet. So something like that is going to be fine. We need to copy this several times. But what I'm going to do first is I don't want that diamond to be lined up with the diamond at the top. It needs to be offset slightly. So let's put the origin there. Firstly, make sure that's there. So I'm going to rotate that around the Z-axis by 36 degrees. But I'm going to apply the rotation now. So press Ctrl A and apply the rotation. I'm sure there's a better way to do this, but I just did it this way. It's what came to me at the time. And I'm going to add an empty plane axis. Let's rename this. Put that into the Goblet collection. And select the diamond and add a modifier, which is going to be an array modifier. Increase the count. We're going to, of course, add 10. Now, that's not what we want. We want to use the rotation from the empty. So let's click on Object Offset, turn off Relative, and select the empty as our object. And if we rotate the empty, magic happens. Check this out. Voila, look at that. It's very cool. So we need to rotate that by 36 so we get a nice even distribution of those 10 diamonds. Let's turn our goblet back on. That looks really cool. I'm rotating it a little bit by 18 degrees actually, because it ended up being vertical again with that top diamond. I don't want that, I want it to be either side of the diamond. Remember the backup you made earlier of that diamond? We're going to copy that, rename it to 2, I guess, and same process now. So move it into position. I'll speed this up because it's exactly the same thing as the base. Make sure you're in edit mode when you're rotating the object. It's very important. If not, apply the rotation. And I'm rotating it again around the 3D cursor on the Z-axis. So we've got it slightly offset. And we're going to use the same thing. So I've copied the modifiers from the other diamond, or add an array modifier manually through the menu there. Select the same empty, and that one's gone all over the place because our origin point is not at the same place as the goblet basically. So with that done, I'll speed through this because it's exactly the same thing again. There it is. Move it down. In fact, you could just go into edit mode and select those faces, duplicate them, and everything will already be set up anyway. So duplicate the faces from the other one and position them in place. Now this one is not, actually it looks bad, doesn't look too bad like that, but again, make sure the 3D cursor is your pivot point. I'm going to rotate those about 18 degrees again. And there we go. Now this next part is, you can see there, we're going to create this spiral that goes from the base of the cup right up to the top. And for this, you're going to make sure you have extra curves turned on. So in preferences, add-ons, extra curve, extra objects, or add curve, extra objects, I should say. So add a curve, go to curve spirals, select Archimedean, that works. And here we can make some changes. So let's change the height so we can see the spiral actually working in action. Increase the number of turns. Here it's just a trial and error thing, so give it as many turns as you like. Obviously the more you put, the more tweaking you have to do later. There's way too many steps in this as well, so make sure it's set to Bezier and auto so we get this nice rounded flow, and turn down the steps because that's way too many, very difficult to work with. So something like that works fine. Keep it as minimal as possible. I went with 5. That should be enough. Now the tricky part, and I'm going to speed through this, is you have to go through and select the points. But firstly, we're going to make sure this is not, it's fairly close to the stem of the cup basically. So something like that, because there will be some thickness to this. So something like that, but of course the top and the bottom go right through the middle of the cup. So now in edit mode, once you've done that, go into edit mode and move all the points around, just the ones that are sticking through the cup. And this does take a few minutes, I'm not going to lie. You'll notice I'm using normal as the orientation, not global or local. I used normal a lot for this and it worked really well. So yeah, this took a few minutes to do. Very fiddly work, and the goal is to make the curve just sit proud of the cup. Just enough to give it a bit of distance from the surface of the cup. So with that done, I've added a bevel under the curve options. least now you've got the thickness, you can easily place them quite accurately. Now to scale the points down is Alt S, not S, Alt S, and that will scale the curve points down. Let's press fill caps as well. You can press E to extrude if you need more points or a longer curve. So with that done, so once you're happy with that, we can duplicate it. So there's our spiral. Let's rename it to Goblet Spiral. What a surprise that is, eh? Let's put that into the Goblet collection as well. Select it, and we're going to create linked duplicates, not duplicates. So Alt D, duplicate it, and then set your rotation point as the 3D cursor, which should be at the world center. Then rotate it. I did 90, 180 and 270. So I'm always selecting the original one, Alt D, and typing in the rotation, just like that. That looks great. Now we've got a bit of a problem. You can notice there that the point at the top is going through the diamond shape. Whoops. So we can fix that by making the curve shorter. So let's select these points. 1 point, because that's why we made lint duplicates. If you edit one, you edit all of them, which is great. Rotate them, move them, and they're almost in the center of that diamond as well. There we go. I've actually increased the number of diamonds as well this time around to 20, not 10. So make sure you update the empty rotation as well. And there we go. We've got a slightly offset, so we might as well put it in the middle. Looks really cool like that. Perfect. Let's move on to texturing. I stumbled across this excellent video about glass in Blender. So I downloaded this free shader that he created. So download that. Once you've downloaded it, go to File, Append, find the Blender file and dig into the Material folder and append it to the glass object. And you can see there in the drop down menu, it's called Advanced Glass. So I'm going to use a color, a green. There are the values, 50DD C1. And drag and drop that into the absorption color as well. Play around with the roughness. You've got two types of roughness there, surface and glass. It helps to have the Node Wrangler add-on, of course, so make sure you have that enabled in your add-ons in preferences. We're going to call this mottled metal. And I'm going to use a a Musgrave texture for this one. All procedural. Firstly, change the texture coordinates to object, not UV. Let's move them to the side a little bit, get some more space, and press Control Shift and Control Shift and click the Principled BF to see how that works. And let's plug that into the roughness. You can see how that looks there. Let's add a color ramp and drop that there. Control Shift and click on a node to preview it. You can see what we're doing now with our color ramp. Here's the value I used. Remember, black is very shiny, one is matte finish, so we want greys primarily. Great, with that done, let's also add a bump node. And we use the same texture again. Bit of tidying up. Plug the normal into the normal. And drag the height into the height. Now that's very aggressive right off the bat, so let's turn that down. Metallic should be set to 1, of course. Let's duplicate that color ramp node, plug in the Musgrave again into the factor, and this one we use for the color, the base color. And the second one is that one there. I think they look pretty cool. a very simple shader network there. And of course the values will depend on your scale of your object, so that's the general look you want to try and go for. Just have a look at the different lighting conditions, change the HDRI, and see how that behaves. Now let's add the metallic material to these spirals. So I want to use the mottled metal again. I want to copy it by pressing the number 2, rename it to 2. That's very original. All I'm going to do is turn down the bump map. Doesn't have to be as bumpy. So we're going to apply the same material to the chain. And that looks good. And then we can add a new material slot just here by clicking the plus and select the material we just created, and don't forget to hit assign, otherwise you won't see that. Let's have a look. Voila, there we go. That blends in nicely, of course, with the cut base. Let's create a new material for this. I'm going to call it Decor 1. Not very original, but it works. Right, and we're going to bring in these texture maps. These ones here. Just going to grab a few of them. Now we don't need the displacement, and I recommend that you make it good practice to check through your nodes once you've done that with Node Wrangler. Again, Control Shift and T will bring in a whole set of texture maps, but you want to make sure that it's plugged them into the right slots, and get rid of any that you don't need. So I don't need displacement really, so I'm going to get rid of that. Phew, it's gone. Bit of tidying up. Again, more check-in, make sure everything's plugged in to the right place. Don't need that one. Make it metallic. And we need to unwrap this. That's why we can't see it on the object. It's got no UVs. So I'm going to isolate the object by pressing the / key on the keyboard. We want to put a seam right down the back. Before I do that though, let me add a couple of supporting edge loops which I forgot to copy from the beginning. Right, let's select this edge loop or cut here. Right click and select Mark Seam. Just like you have seams in clothes, that's exactly what you're doing when you UV unwrap something. You're saying this is where it's going to be cut for UV unwrapping. With that done, select all the faces and unwrap and see what that gives you in the UV editing workspace. That's not too bad. Let's have a look at that in a rendered view. But it's facing the wrong way, of course. So with that selected over here, you can press this button here, by the way, to keep the UVs in the window. Otherwise, they disappear if you click off the model. So with those selected, we're going to press R90. Do an operation. Now UV pack islands, it's packed them but it's rotated them again. So in the options, just turn off rotate and that will place them just like that. And that's fine, but they're not quite straight, which they need to be straight because hopefully they'll tile. So select some edges and then right click and select align auto. That will straighten those. The reason being, you can then select that face, right click and select follow active quads, and that will straighten all of the other quads attached to that initial face. Really cool feature that in Blender. It's brilliant. Now that looks cool, but it's way too big. You might like it like that, by all means keep it. There might be a glitch at the back of the cup, but I'm not too worried about that. I want this to repeat a little bit more so you get a bit more detail. So let's change the scale on all of those from 1 to say 3 or 4. I think 4 would work better. There we go. And there is a problem there at the back because of the way, just the way the UVs are really. It shouldn't be like that. In hindsight, I should have probably split those faces into 2 parts with a physical cut, or made some sort of separation between them. But it shouldn't be doing that, which is quite odd. I'll have to investigate that another time. So I'm just going to make sure these are right up to the edge. Something like that is fine. So let's have a look at that again now in rendered mode. I'll look at the back. It looks really cool from this front and the side. That looks great. And you could model these, by the way. Don't have to use a texture. At this point, I'm trying to figure out why this seam is not working quite the way I'd like. But I'm also going to add the alpha mask to the specular, just to make sure we don't get any highlights in the alpha areas. Now on this one it looks way too small, so I'm not going to edit this material though, because that will obviously change the part of the top as well. So let's make a copy of this material so it's only used on this part of the model. But before we do that, let's select this one face, and like before, go to edge mode, select each edge, right click and align auto. That will put me into a nice, neat strip of polygons like that. And then pack islands. That works not too bad. There we go. Again, it's a bit too heavy with the detail. You can see the difference there between the two. So I'm going to duplicate this one and call it, guess what? Number 2, correct. 10 points to you. Oh, that glitch there at the back is not looking good. Let's try a scale of 2. That's looking better. I'm going to speed this up because it's not worth watching. I'm just trying to fix this seam at the back. And I'm going to ignore that, just leave it, I'm not going to see it. And yeah, download this texture as well. Select the glass object and head over to the shading workspace. Here are the files downloaded, surface imperfections. I'm only going to use one of the maps, that's the roughness one. And I've changed the blending there from flat to box because there's no UVs for this glass, so you feel free to do that if you want, but I wanted to use it as a box and change the blend value to 0.5. First of all, I'm going to plug that into the glass roughness and see how that looks. And that's what we want, but it's a little bit too detailed, a bit too small in the scale, so to bring that down a little bit, let's try 0.5. That's not looking too bad. Yeah, I think that 0.25 works better. Make a little bit more space and add a color ramp, which allows us to get a bit more control over the texture map that we've just added here. So add the color ramp, drop it into between those two nodes. Some minor adjustments to the black level there, bring that up. Yeah, I can just about see it there. I don't know if you can see it on the video here, but it is there. Let's change the HDRI and see if we can see it better under different lighting conditions. Just tweaking this color ramp a little bit more. Now you can definitely see that now. Of course, I didn't dirty up the metallic finish as well, but you're more than welcome to do that. And to see how to do that, check out my other video on how to mix 2 or more materials. Right, with that done, a bit of tidying up. of course, rename the empty to whatever you like so you know what it is. All you need to do now is manipulate the empty and you're good to go. Right, thanks for watching everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. Join me on the next one. And if you like this video, a like and subscribe is always appreciated. Take care and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.